This presentation will focus on 35 U.S.C. Section 112, specifically what 112A is, the analysis that is required for 112A, and how 112A should be applied in your office actions. The text of 35 U.S.C. Section 112A, as amended, is provided on this slide. 112A focuses on the content of the specification. The three requirements of 112A are commonly referred to as written description, enablement, and best mode. In exchange for a right to exclude others from practicing the claimed invention, 35 U.S.C. Section 112A sets forth that applicant must provide a meaningful disclosure of the invention to the public such that the public can make and use the invention. Though 112A focuses on the content of the specification, you need to remember that the invention is still defined by the claims. Therefore, any subject matter that is not claimed is not subject to the requirements of 35 U.S.C. 112A. U.S.C. 112A sets forth three distinct and separate requirements. While each will be explained further in this presentation, you should understand that written description is an analysis of whether the applicant was in possession of the claimed invention. Enablement is an analysis of whether applicant's disclosure enables one of skill in the art to make and use the claimed invention, and best mode prohibits the applicant from concealing the best mode or preferred embodiments of practicing the claimed invention. The written description requirement is separate and distinct from the enablement requirement. Written description and enablement do not stand or fall together. For example, a finding of lack of written description does not necessarily mean there will also be a lack of enablement and vice versa. We will now discuss the written description requirement in more detail. The fundamental factual inquiry is whether the specification conveys with reasonable clarity to those skilled in the art that as of the filing date sought, applicant was in possession of the invention as now claimed. From the standpoint of one of skill in the art, at the time the application was filed, information which is well known in the art need not be described in detail in the specification. However, sufficient information must be provided to show that the inventor had possession of the invention as claimed. Applicant does not have to describe the invention literally or in great detail, as long as the disclosure allows one of ordinary skill in the art to recognize that applicant has invented and is in possession of what's being claimed. This includes not merely describing what the invention does, but also its structure. The main purpose of the written description requirement is for the applicant to show the Patent Office what had been constructively reduced to practice at the time the application was filed. The originally filed drawings, specification, abstract, and claims constitute the written description, also referred to as the disclosure. Applicant can use any combination of terminology, formulas, structures, figures, and diagrams to fully disclose their invention. Therefore, you should not limit yourself to only a single portion of the disclosure when determining whether the written description requirement has been met. To determine whether applicant had possession of the originally filed claimed invention, you will need to take into account the following considerations. Based on the disclosure, can the claimed invention actually be reduced to practice? Do all parts of the written description help you better understand the claimed invention? Do drawings or chemical formulas help? Are characteristics mentioned, such as the structure of the invention, that can help you in the determination? Does the written description contain enough information to make the claimed invention? The written description requirement of 112A applies to all claims including original claims. MPEP 2163, Section 2 provides a methodology for determining adequacy of written description. Number 1. Determine what the claim as a whole covers. Number 2. Review the entire application to understand how the inventor provides support for the claimed invention, including each element and/or step. And 3. Determine whether there is sufficient written description to inform one of ordinary skill in the art that the inventor was in possession of the claimed invention as a whole at the time the application was filed. An original claim may lack written description when the claim defines the invention in functional language, specifying a desired result, but the specification does not sufficiently identify how the function is performed or result is achieved. For software, this can occur when the algorithm or steps procedure for performing the computer function are not explained at all or are not explained in sufficient detail. Simply restating the function recited in the claim is not necessarily sufficient to satisfy written description. An original claim may also lack written description when a broad genus claim is presented but the specification only describes a narrow species with no evidence that the genus is contemplated. For processes, this can occur when the claim covers all ways of performing a process, but the specification discloses only one method. A written description issue can arise in a number of different circumstances where it must be determined whether the subject matter of the claim is supported in an application as filed. Most typically, the issue will arise in the circumstances listed here. Because the original claims are part of the original disclosure, applicant can rely on the original claims to show possession. However, merely reproducing a claim limitation in the specification or pointing to an original claim does not satisfy the written description requirement unless the claim itself conveys enough information to show that the inventor had possession of the claimed invention at the time of filing. An applicant is allowed to make amendments during prosecution of the application. However, it is your job as an examiner to ensure the subject matter being added is supported by the original disclosure. If you find that subject matter added to claims is new matter, then the claims containing the new matter should be rejected under 35 U.S.C. 112A as failing to be supported by the original disclosure. Remember, a dependent claim contains each and every limitation of its parent claim and should be rejected in conjunction with the parent claim if the parent claim contains new matter. If you find the subject matter added to the drawings and/or specifications is new matter, then the portions of the drawings and/or specification containing the new matter should be objected to under 35 U.S.C. 132 as failing to be supported by the original disclosure. In either situation, you must provide reasoning and/or proof why the added subject matter is considered new matter. Furthermore, the exact wording of the original claims do not have to be part of the specification. Possible scenarios in which subject matter added to the original disclosure would not be considered new matter include amending subject matter that maintains its original meaning and adding subject matter from one portion of the original disclosure to another. Examining patent claims for compliance with the written description requirement should include: Number 1. Determining what the claim as a whole covers. Number 2. Reviewing the application in full to understand how the applicant provides support for the claimed invention, including each element and/or step. And number 3. Determining whether the applicant was in possession of the claimed invention. Because there is a presumption that a specification as filed provides an adequate written description under Section 112A, the office has the initial burden of presenting evidence or reasons why persons of ordinary skill in the art would not recognize a description of the invention defined in the claims. When the specification, including all of the written description and drawings, fails to support a claim as a whole, a rejection of the claim under Section 112A is appropriate. The burden is then on the examiner to set forth a prima facie case providing reasons why the specification is deficient and thus the claim that relies thereon is rejected. In doing so, the examiner should identify the claim and limitation at issue and provide reasons why a person of ordinary skill in the art would not have recognized that the inventor was in possession of the invention as claimed in view of the disclosure of the application as filed. Note that a mere statement that the application disclosure does not support the claim is insufficient. See, for example, the 2007 Federal Circuit decision Hyatt v. Dudas, where the court deemed a written description rejection sufficient when based on a detailed explanation by the examiner regarding which claim elements were not adequately supported. In drafting the rejection, the examiner should identify the claim limitation that lacks written description support and explain what is lacking in the specification. The following is a sample explanation. Claim 1 recites using 3 separate codes in the method of authorizing debit purchase transactions. The specification does not disclose the use of 3 separate codes. The specification fails to provide a written description that shows the inventor possessed the invention as recited in Claim 1. Form paragraphs are available for the examiner's use in making a rejection for lack of written description under 112A. As a reminder, when appropriate, the examiner may suggest amendments to the claims to resolve the deficiency, provided the amendments would be supported by the application as filed. Clarity of the prosecution record is of the utmost importance. By explicitly identifying the meaning of a claim term during prosecution, the meaning of such a term is clarified in the granted patent because the record will reflect the mutual understanding of the scope and content of the claim reached by the examiner and the applicant. By explaining on the record the meaning of a claim term, the examiner can focus prosecution so that applicant can provide a clear response to any prior art rejections as well as any rejections based on issues arising under 35 U.S.C. 112. By clarifying claim scope on the record during patent prosecution, the public, including competitors, will have a better understanding of the patent protection granted, which can spur innovation in areas beyond the scope of protection. Additionally, discussions of claim construction in the prosecution record will inform the PTAB and the courts as to how the examiner and the applicant, in procuring the patent, viewed the claim terms at the time of grant. Providing claim interpretations on the record during prosecution can also assist the courts in their claim construction tasks during litigation. As a summary for covering written description, remember that an original claim may lack written description when the claim defines the invention in functional language, specifying a desired result, but the specification does not sufficiently identify how the function is performed or result is achieved. For programmed computer functions, it is important to determine whether the specification discloses in adequate detail the computer and the algorithm, for example, the necessary steps and/or flowcharts that perform the claimed function, as it is not enough that one skilled in the art could write a program to achieve the claimed function. Additionally, it is important to establish a clear prosecution record by setting forth reasons why the application disclosure fails to provide written description support under 112A, and thus the claims that rely thereon are rejected. We will now discuss the enablement requirement in more detail. Ultimately, one of ordinary skill in the art should be able to make and use the claimed invention by reading and understanding the specification to meet the enablement requirement. If one of ordinary skill would not be able to make and use the claimed invention after reading and understanding the specification, a rejection may be proper under 35 U.S.C. 112A. The term undue experimentation does not appear in the statute, but it is well established that enablement requires that the specification teach those in the art to make and use the invention without undue experimentation. The amount of experimentation that is considered undue is often art-dependent. In 1988, the Federal Circuit outlined various considerations for determining whether the amount of experimentation could be considered undue. The determination of what constitutes undue experimentation in a given case is based on what is considered reasonable by one of ordinary skill in the art, taking into account the nature of the invention and the state of the art. The test is not merely quantitative, since a considerable amount of experimentation is permissible if it is merely routine, or if the specification in question provides a reasonable amount of guidance with respect to the direction in which the experimentation should proceed to enable the determination of how to practice a desired embodiment of the invention claimed. These considerations are called Wands factors. The Wands factors set forth here are the factors used when making an undue experimentation determination and will be discussed in the next several slides. With respect to the breadth of a claim, the relevant concern is whether the scope of enablement provided to one skilled in the art by the disclosure is commensurate with the scope of protection sought by the claims. The nature of the invention is the relevant subject matter to which the claimed invention pertains. The state of the art existing at the filing date of the application is used to determine whether a particular disclosure is enabling as of the filing date. Regarding level of skill, the application specification must be written so that one reasonably skilled in the art could make and use the claimed invention. Regarding predictability, what is known in the art provides evidence as to the question of predictability, for example, pioneering art versus crowded art, which will dictate the amount of disclosure that must be provided in the application specification to enable the claimed invention. The amount of guidance or direction needed to enable the invention is inversely related to the amount of knowledge in the state of the art, as well as the predictability in the art. A single working example in the specification for a claimed invention may be enough to preclude a rejection, which states that nothing is enabled since at least one embodiment is enabled. Is there a reasonable amount of guidance with respect to the direction in which the experimentation should proceed? Time and expense are merely factors and are not the controlling factors. When the specification fails to enable the full scope of a claim, a rejection of the claim under 112A is appropriate. Because there is a presumption that a specification as filed is enabled under 112A, the burden is on the examiner to set forth a prima facie case, providing reasons why the specification is deficient, and thus the claim that relies thereon is rejected. In doing so, the examiner should identify the claim and limitation at issue, and weigh all of the evidence of record related to the pertinent Wands factors, and provide reasons why undue experimentation would be needed to make and use the full scope of the claimed invention. The explanation of the rejection need only focus on those factors, reasons, and evidence that lead the examiner to conclude, for example, that the specification fails to teach how to make and use the claimed invention without undue experimentation, or that the scope of any enablement provided to one skilled in the art is not commensurate with the scope of protection sought by the claims. In drafting a rejection, the examiner should identify the claim limitation or limitations that are not enabled and provide reasoning by explaining what is lacking in the specification. A sample explanation is shown here. Form paragraphs are available for the examiner's use in making a rejection for lack of enablement under 112A. As a reminder, under compact prosecution, any claim amendments recognized by the examiner that would resolve the issue should be noted early in prosecution. As a summary for enablement, remember that the critical inquiry is whether the specification provides enough information so that one of ordinary skill in the art can make and or use the full scope of the claimed invention without undue experimentation. Analysis regarding whether a disclosure is enabling must be based on a consideration of all the evidence of record related to the pertinent WANS factors and the evidence as a whole. Enablement issues typically arise with computer-implemented inventions when the scope of the claim is not commensurate with the disclosure, such that the claim would cover all devices for or ways of performing a function. Additionally, it is important to establish a clear prosecution record by setting forth reasons related to the pertinent WANS factors as to why the application disclosure fails to enable the claim or claims under 112A, and thus the claims that rely thereon are rejected. We will now discuss the best mode requirement in more detail. The best mode requirement creates a statutory bargain for exchange by which the patentee obtains the right to exclude others from practicing the claimed invention for a certain time period, and the public receives knowledge of the preferred embodiments for practicing the claimed invention. The purpose of the best mode requirement is to prevent applicant from hiding the optimal form of the invention. As an examiner, you should always be on the lookout for evidence that the mode described in the original disclosure is not the best mode known to applicant. However, if no evidence exists, then you should assume applicant has disclosed the best mode. Information regarding best mode is generally difficult to find, but could be found in declarations or other forms of communication by applicant. There are two components in a best mode analysis. The first component is to subjectively determine whether applicant knew of a best mode of the invention. If the applicant knew of a best mode at the time the application was filed, then the examiner should move to the second component of the best mode analysis. The second component for the best mode analysis is to objectively determine whether the best mode known by applicant at the time of filing is enabled by the original disclosure. If the answer to the first component is yes, and the answer to the second component is no, then the best mode rejection may be proper. Otherwise, no best mode rejection should be made. In conclusion, when making any rejection under 35 U.S.C. Section 112A, you bear the initial burden in showing applicant has failed to meet the requirements of 112A. After this is completed, you must properly address all other issues and apply prior art if appropriate. You should now be more familiar with what 35 U.S.C. Section 112A is, what the three requirements of 112A are, and how to apply the statute in office actions.